do you notice a wolf in the cover? And I was like, yeah. What do you mean? And she was like, don't you just remember the imagery of Radiohead's "Hail to the Thief" at Wolf at the Door? You know, it just she was like, I'm impressed because she is like kind of surrendering to that wolf that that Tom York used to say in Wolf at the Door. You know,
Yeah.
I keep the wolf from the door, but he calls me up, and you're here saying, I'm not crying wolf, I'm out here.
Yeah.
Looking for them in the morning when I wake up naked. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. Tell me about the imagery in the cover and this whole thing, this crazy thing that my sister put together as she was listening to the album.
I mean, no, and there's that song. I think there's a lot of interesting, well, I mean, inside and outside of that folktale of the crying wolf. But, there's another song by David Bazan called Wolves at the Door, and it's kind of the same premise, right? He's saying, like, he's basically telling a story about this person that invites wolves into ravage his home willingly. And I don't know, that's something that I recognized I was doing a lot over the course of recording this record. I found myself in a cycle of self-destructive behavior and repeatedly reaching out for precisely the things that I knew were unhealthy or dangerous for me. And I wondered why I was doing those things. And I don't know, it's like, maybe it's just a personification of the parts of myself that I hadn't allowed myself to accept. I think in my past 2 records, there's a very clear dichotomy between the person I was that did bad things and the person I am that is, recovered or better. And when I finally confronted this imaginary wolf or this like demon or however you want to personify it, that was the only way that I could have power over it, right? Is to stop denying that it exists. But then, I don't know, it's a multifaceted thing because then when you intentionally engage with the wolf, as it were.
So we got the same microphone.
Yes. SM7B, can't go wrong.
Why do we like that microphone? I really don't get it because it's like every time I talk to people who are like really big sound geeks, they always say something like, that microphone is cool, but the gain is very low. And it's true.
It's true, but also like, I mean, I recorded all of Sprained Ankle on an SM7B. And I like performing on SM7Bs. This is not a comparison at all, but the entire record Thriller by Michael Jackson was recorded on an SM7B.
You are kidding me. How do you know that?
Because I went to audio school. And they were like, I mean, I think I often don't like my voice with like a Neumann or something too crisp. I like it to have a little bit of like, I don't know, I like what the SM7B does, but also it's like, I'm just here making demos in my house. I'm not like a sound nerd. This record, Little Oblivions, we did on like a Neumann U87, so it's still like big. But I don't have thousands of dollars to spend on a microphone, so I'm just gonna get out with this cheap one. But
so how you been?
I have been okay. Yeah, I don't know. I've been basically in this room for the past year. So what about yourself? How have you been recently?
I've been all right. I mean, I can't complain. I've also been pretty locked up and pretty locked down. And but everything's going fine, everything's going well, as long as the dog is around, and you get to walk him out. And just
Do you have a dog?
I got one. I got a dog. I actually got him before the whole pandemic thing started. He was like 6 months old. And
oh, wow.
And it was amazing because he kind of saved my life.
Yeah, same with I got my dog right before I went back to college. So yeah, about 6 or 7 months before quarantine. And now all I do is hang out with her all day. And it's like, in quarantine too, it's difficult to create, since all your work, or at least in my case, like all my work is from home, and if I don't watch it, my schedule can get really fluid and wonky. But, you know, it's like the dog wakes me up at 8:30 in the morning and gets me, like, you know, to actually go outside. I can't really mope around because there's this dog that doesn't understand, like, why can't we go on a walk? I don't understand. I don't know what depression is. So, like, yeah, she's been helpful. I'm glad you have a little furry companion, too.
It fixes my schedule all the way, and he's done it for the past year and 8 months. And let me tell you, I've struggled a lot with just fixing a schedule, with just doing something consistently, and he's been able to pull that off.
Yeah,
without breaking a sweat.
Yeah. What kind of dog is it?
He's a dachshund. It's a wiener dog.
Like a little tiny one? Aw, that's adorable. Mine's like a big hound dog, so she's massive. She's a lot to deal with, but.
So where do you live? You live in Tennessee?
I live in Tennessee. Yeah, I live in Nashville right now. I'm originally from Memphis, but this is where I was, and then the quarantine happened, so I just locked down here. Cool.
Why did you decide to go back to school? That was something I didn't want to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway because I'm just curious. I tried going back to school last year with the whole pandemic thing, and it just didn't work. Why did you decide?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I'm horrible at online classes. I think I really need the engagement. So I wonder if I had waited until the pandemic to go back to school, if I would have been able to pull it off either. But I decided to go back to school. Funny, we were just talking about this, but I decided to go back to school when I came off the road because I don't know. It was evident that it was not healthy for me to still be out there touring and that I needed a break, but I realized that if I came home and just sat in my apartment, I would drive myself crazy. So I had always wanted to finish my degree, and I only had one semester left, so I registered so that I would have some sort of external accountability for my time. And that was basically it. I mean, you know, aside from just wanting to have a bachelor's degree, but the more that I went back, the more I think, or the more time that I spent back in school, the more I realized how much I had missed living in a student community and having my days not consist of playing my own music and imagining myself as a performer and day after day, like, being so seen by everyone. It was nice to just study literature, you know, and kind of detach from that world.
How long have you been a performer?
Gosh, I mean, I don't know if it counts to have been in a local band, but I've been playing shows regularly in town, like locally and on tour, since I was 16 years old.
Wow.
So, yeah, but I mean, it's so much different when you're playing in a band and, you know, like we would tour in college and play to bars where there's 10 people. And I was playing with my 3 best friends in the entire universe, and then all of a sudden I switched to playing bigger venues with much, you know, 200 or 300 people in a little club, which felt massive to me, but I was all by myself up on stage. And it's much different, I think, which is why I was excited to tour this record, because now I have players that would be touring with me, but, you know, who knows when that would be.
Did going to school affect that decision of working with a full band on this recording?
I had made a couple of demos before, like way before I ever went back to school, and I had imagined that they would have drums and everything, but I was still so apprehensive about how I was going to pull that off and what the stylistically and thematically how I was going to make it work. And I think going back to school and detaching from music being my job allowed me to feel more comfortable experimenting with sounds and feel less beholden to a persona that had been constructed around me as a performer. And it was really gratifying to sort of, you know, dismantle all these parameters I thought existed around what I should and shouldn't do, sounds I should and shouldn't incorporate into my music, what's appropriate for my music, and it helped me just think about, like, how do I make a song that I'm proud of and fulfilled by.
Was it challenging?
To make the record? Yeah, I mean...
With the full band, I mean?
Oh, well, it's like so all of the instruments are played by either myself or Calvin Lauber, my good friend. Yeah, so he and I played most of the instruments and like wrote all the drum parts, and then there are some things that he would like edit or retrack and be like, what about this sound? But it was such despite it being a full band production with a lot wider of a sonic palette, it was still just this very intimate experience of myself and Calvin workshopping these songs pretty much, by ourselves. And I also think that was probably helpful in the writing process because I feel such an intuitive musical chemistry with Calvin, and also he's been my friend for over 10 years. So I felt like I could trust him with these things that were so precious to me, I'm trying to be less so, but I do feel quite precious with my music sometimes. I'm better now, to just change them around and chop them up. I think maybe not so much when I was younger.
Did the thesis in college inform the decisions that you and Calvin made as to all the precious stuff that you're mentioning and that becomes involved in the making of the album, like from a synesthetic point of view, to put it in?
Oh, yeah. Well, honestly, I mean, on Turn Out the Lights, we did, I don't know, I think that my way of imagining music has always informed the finished recording product. I mean, like, on the previous record, which I also made with Calvin, I went around and like tore out little sheets of paper that were the colors corresponding to every song and like stapled them into a spiral. And with this one, I didn't do such deliberate or exact physical representations. I think maybe because I've been working with Calvin so long now that I know how to describe to him a sound that I want, even though I might not have the music theory terminology. But yeah, I think maybe less in the literal synesthetic realm, and the thesis did inform the music because here I was writing about what exactly it was that made me passionate about music, and in so doing, it was like I was reminding myself how to have a relationship with music that didn't feel like it was just a platform for an ideology or like I don't want to say a mission, but like a way to speak to people and communicate ideas. Music is that for me, but I think I very quickly got recognized for my music way beyond the level of what I ever thought I would achieve, and then I felt this obligation to do something good with it, to make a discernible positive impact with the music that I was making. And I stopped thinking about just making sounds that were pleasing to me, and I started thinking about, what I could accomplish ideologically with music. And it felt good to let some of that go and to just return to the pure enjoyment of arranging sounds.
I only have a few minutes to finish this interview.
Sure.
I would love to continue talking, but
No.
got a couple things that I wanted to share with you. One of them, my sister, was listening to the album yesterday, and she was like, "Dude, do you notice a wolf in the cover?" And I was like, "Yeah." What do you mean? And she was like, "Don't you just remember the imagery of Radiohead's Hail to the Thief at Wolf at the Door?" It just, she was like, "I'm impressed because she is like kind of surrendering to that wolf, that Tom York used to say in Wolf at the Door,
Yeah.
I keep the wolf from the door, but he calls me up, and you're here saying, I'm not crying wolf, I'm out here
Yeah.
looking for them in the morning when I wake up naked. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. Tell me about the imagery in the cover and this whole thing, this crazy thing that my sister put together as she was listening to the album.
I mean, no, and there's that song. I think there's a lot of interesting, inside and outside of that folktale of the crying wolf. But, there's another song by David Bazan called Wolves at the Door, and it's kind of the same premise, right? He's saying, like, he's basically telling a story about this person that invites wolves into ravage his home willingly. And I don't know, that's something that I recognized I was doing a lot over the course of recording this record. I found myself in a cycle of self-destructive behavior and repeatedly reaching out for precisely the things that I knew were unhealthy or dangerous for me. And I wondered why I was doing those things. And I don't know, it's like, maybe it's just a personification of the parts of myself that I hadn't allowed myself to accept. I think in my past 2 records, there's a very clear dichotomy between the person I was that did bad things and the person I am that is, recovered or better. And when I finally confronted this imaginary wolf or this like demon or however you want to personify it, that was the only way that I could have power over it, right? Is to stop denying that it exists. But then, I don't know, it's a multifaceted thing because then when you intentionally engage with the wolf, as it were.
2 last questions. First one is, how do you feel about, I don't want this to sound like either flattering or pressuring, but
sure,
how do you feel about the moment that the music that you are writing is kind of like amplifying, and the way women in music are adopting many of the things you've done before, in the sense that it seems as though you become a leader for the generation. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think that the most valuable thing I could do as somebody who occupies a larger than average platform, I guess, or is recognized in the public sphere, is to go on acting in the best way that I know how to be a human being, but not dispensing advice or ideology. I just, there are some people who are very good at that. There are some people who are very singularly minded and who are quite sure of themselves and what they believe in. I've always been, I know, and you're not making me feel pressured. If anything, I make myself feel pressured because, I historically have wanted to have something good to say, something good to promote, and to be a good example to set. But as I move forward in my musical career, I recognize that the best that I can do is just try to be genuine and admit when I'm wrong and do the best that I can. Yeah, I mean, it's like, that sounds so lame and corny, but
it isn't. It isn't.
Yeah.
It definitely isn't. It sounds, but it isn't. Believe me, because there's so many people out there who feel like you do, and I think it's beautiful because it's authentic and it's honest and it's sincere. To me, it is.
Thank you. Yeah, that's all you can do.
Yeah, sure. And the last question, this one comes directly from my sister, who just is a big fan of yours and helped me put this whole thing together. And I want to thank you for taking the time. Has got to do with how you cope with grief nowadays. She asked me to ask you because she knows that you used to go running to deal with anxiety, but got bad knees as a result, and that resonated too much with her because she used to dance. She used to be in ballet and things, and she injured both her knees, and that's when her depression and substance abuse started. So she wanted to know how you cope with grief.
Well, I still run. I just can't run nearly as far or as much as I was running. Especially when I was on tour and I was doing like longer distance half marathon things. But I find it was almost, and speaking specifically to her experience, I feel like it was almost an exercise, like a mental exercise for me to go through having, injured tendons and injured knees, because it made me have to figure out other ways to cope, or it made me look at running as an achievement or something I had to do or something I was training for, and to just start making time to be outside and to be alone and to process my thoughts, without having to, have it be something productive. And I know with running, maybe running is a lot less creative than dance, and I can't imagine being a dancer and not being able to do it anymore. It's like, if I couldn't play music anymore. But I don't know. I think the way that I deal with grief is by accepting it's there. I went to so many many months of therapy, and there are so many ways that people can tell you how to deal with grief, how to compartmentalize it, how to not compartmentalize it, how to construct healthy coping strategies. But the most useful practice that I have found in the past couple of years is allowing myself to feel sadness instead of trying to cover it up or do mental acrobatics to convince myself I shouldn't be sad. And to just think of it in terms of my body. Like when I feel sadness, I'm feeling sad right now. And I don't have to engage with it with such fear. I can just know that sometimes I will feel sadness, and it doesn't mean, I'll never feel happiness again. It's quite hard, but that is, unfortunately, I believe that's most of life, is coping in that way.
Julien, thank you very much for taking the time. We got to wrap this up. I thank you for a beautiful new album, and I wish you the best. If you could pick a song for our listeners in Colombia to introduce them the album, which one would you choose to hear on the radio here in Bogota?
Let's do Favor. I really like that song. Great.
Cool. Julien Baker, thank you very much. It's been great. It's been a pleasure. Take care.